This was effectively a massive boondoggle omnibus, even though it's not called that. This was an absolute Christmas list for the left. And even worse than that, that's bad enough, Sean, we have a debt situation right now which is so precarious in this country. Interest rates are spiking again, placing this country at the edge of a fiscal cliff. This is no time for business as usual nonsense. And Sean, you mentioned Twitter or X. I believe that platform, which thankfully is now a legitimate free speech platform for America, America's digital public square, is perhaps the main reason why they didn't get away with it.
Good Thursday to you all. Washington is not in the holiday spirit right now. There is a major, major blow up happening to fund the government, to kick the can down the road, to be appropriate, to be factual, actually. These guys, it is unbelievable. They all act like somehow they didn't know that this was coming. They didn't pass the bills that they were supposed to pass, and their backs are against the wall. And guess what? When it came time to make sure the government was funded, they made sure that they were taken care of. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But don't worry. They got caught, and they've been exposed for all of this. We're going to talk a little bit about this. The head of the NCAA, Charlie Baker, the former governor of Massachusetts, testifying up there in Congress, and apparently kind of agrees with Senator Kennedy about trans athletes playing in the NCAA, but doesn't want to do anything about it because it's not his fault. But the big question today is, are we headed for a government shutdown right before Christmas? Before we get to it, I want to tell you about my friends at PhD Weight Loss. Now, look, this is the holiday season. A lot of us are eating more. We usually wait till January 1st to get ready, to get healthy. I've done every fad diet. You name it, I've done it. Some with more success, but they don't last long, do they? The one cool thing about PhD Weight Loss is that it is a lifestyle change. It is not a fad. Look at my friend Seb Gorka. He looks great. I'm confident. I can say that about Seb. I know a good-looking guy when I see one. Seb looks a lot better. And when I asked him how, he said both he and his wife, Katie, joined PhD Weight Loss. You meet with a consultant weekly who's a nutritionist. You do weekly weigh-ins. That's accountability. You can't escape it. And so I have to get on the scale and tell them every week how I'm doing. Luckily, I'm down. But through the holiday season, when it's tough, they're there to hold your hand, to guide you. They give you some starter food to get this thing going. Food is sent to you at no extra cost, part of that program. So, and you get those weekly weigh-ins and accountability. Call them today, 1-864-644-1900, or go to myphdweightloss.com, myphdweightloss.com. All right, guys, the big news in Washington right now is obviously this big streamline bill, this omnibus bill that's going to fund the government till March. You would think that could take like 4 lines. Keep funding government till March, current levels, end of story, let's get out of town. No, it was 1,547 pages. 1,547 pages. And when people started to look into it, guess what they found? Congress had given themselves a pay raise. Congress had exempted themselves from the Obamacare exchanges. Oh, that's so nice of them. They gave themselves a little Christmas gift. They moved the Washington Commanders Stadium. These are not things that were emergency issues. These were not things that were part of continuing to fund government. They just took care of themselves. So I'm excited to bring in the panel and talk about this. Before I do that, I want to tell you about my friends at Tax Network, because all this government spending, remember, costs money, your money. And the IRS keeps calling. And when they do, you need professional help. I don't care what government agency calls you. Don't try to go it alone. Get a lawyer, get some professional help. When the IRS calls, I think the best in the business are the folks at Tax Network USA. And if you go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer, full name there, full name, SEAN, it's the Irish version, guys. TNUSA, taxnetworkusa.com/Sean Spicer. These guys know the IRS inside and out. They know which agents to work with, which agents to stay away from. They've recovered over $1 billion for their clients. So if the IRS sends you one of these pay-up notices and they're trying to squeeze you, get professional help. Get it from the best, the folks at Tax Network. Go to tnusa.com, full name, Sean Spicer, or call them at 1-800-958-1000. All right, I'm excited to bring in the panel. Mr. Steve Cortez, my former colleague at Newsmax, who's now the founder of the League of American Workers, producing some great work over there. He is a veteran of both the 2016 and 2020 Trump campaigns. Tom LoBianco, politics reporter and founder of 24 Insight. He is the biographer of Mike Pence. He's an analyst all over the news. You see him on Fox. And I mean, you just see him everywhere. So he had to come here. And then Patrice Onwuka, my good pal over there at O'Connor and Company. I think 2025, we're going to change it to Onwuka and Company. I'm working on the deal with WMAL. here in your nation's capital. Guys, good to see you all. Steve, you've been all over. I'm still calling it Twitter. I feel like Trump. I call it Twitter. Some people call it X. I call it Twitter. But you've been all over this. I just, look, I get you're not going to solve all the world's problems in one bill in 24 hours. But how the heck did these guys think they were getting away with this? 3 months funding the bill, funding the government, and it's 1,547 pages.
Yeah. And Sean, you mentioned Twitter or X. I believe that platform, which thankfully is now a legitimate free speech platform for America, America's digital public square, is perhaps the main reason why they didn't get away with it. In other words, what they were trying to do relatively in the dark of night before Christmas in Washington, D.C. was impossible because of the transparency and because a lot of outrage activists all over the country, whether it's people who do this for a living like me, or it's just concerned citizens, moms and dads, retirees, veterans, everybody said, wait a second. We're not going to let you lie to us and pretend that this is just a simple, clean, continued resolution, meaning let's just keep going as we are for a few more months until the new Congress is sworn in, until the new president is sworn in. No, this was effectively a massive boondoggle omnibus, even though it's not called that. This was an absolute Christmas list for the left. And even worse than that, that's bad enough, Sean, we have a debt situation right now, which is so precarious in this country. And that's not my opinion, by the way. That's the bond market's opinion, which is far more important than any individual person's opinion. Interest rates are spiking again, placing this country at the edge of a fiscal cliff. This is no time for business as usual nonsense. And for the Congress, including Speaker Johnson, helming this, okay, establishment Republicans, very, very responsible, very complicit in this, in trying to pass by the American people a ludicrous, bloated spending boondoggle.
Patrice, I just don't know. I don't know. Like, I feel like populism is on the rise. People are like, Donald Trump ushered in this era of, we need more accountability and transparency from government. And I don't know what on earth they thought they were doing when they put this on the floor. I mean, look, for those people in the D.C. area, I get it. FedEx Stadium or whatever it's called now, Northwest Stadium, they want to move it to the former site of RFK, which is right in the boundaries of D.C. So there's probably some people who support that. I don't have a problem with it because it's federal land and it gets right. But I also am like, is this the vehicle to be doing this? This is supposed to keep the government open. And it's all these goodies for members of Congress and random constituencies.
Well, this statistic should really raise your ire, right? 90 pages of that entire 1,500-page bill is dedicated to the actual CR. The rest of it, you've got a huge chunk that looks at, frankly, over 1,400 pages or 1,300 pages is dedicated to changes in healthcare. And then you got some that's related to the Farm Bill and some that's disaster relief. I mean, what's interesting is they've folded in disaster relief, but, someone might say, well, okay, it's important, but wait a minute, the hurricanes are 2-3 months gone now. Is that really going to be helpful? Or, are some of the provisions that would relax income requirements, eligibility requirements for federal funding just an open door for more waste and fraud in the federal disaster relief programs? So this is exactly what we end up with, which is the old way of doing business. Republicans, to their credit, a number of them, they passed a number of spending bills this year out of the House. The problem is the Senate did not pass or even take up any of the spending bills that were coming out of their committees. And so now you get to September and people were already talking about this being an end of year, issue. And nobody did anything because everybody was on the campaign trail in September. And so now here we are. Kudos and credit to Elon Musk, not just because Twitter is a place where, people are hearing about this issue, understanding what the federal government is wasting money, but the fact that his bully pulpit, both with teaming up with his DOGE bro, Vivek Ramaswamy, they're going to be looking at the federal budget in general, but they're going to have a huge mouthpiece and microphone for the rest of the next 4 years or longer. And that should absolutely put a lot of policymakers on their toes to be looking over their shoulder when these spending bills come up in the future.
Tom LoBianco, 2 questions for you. The first one is this. Considering the Republicans control the House and the Senate still controlled by the Democrats, at least until January 5th, and that you've got issues with, like the Farm Bill and hurricane relief and the bridge in Baltimore, how much of this is just the reality of horse trading votes And secondly, what do you? I mean, look, I know that there are deals that they're talking about now, but even last night I was listening to Lauren Boebert from Colorado. She was ahead of me on News Nation, and she was saying, "Yeah, I want a clean CR, clean continuing resolution, but we also need to take care of the farmers." Right. And so part of this is how much is, yeah, I want it to be clean, except for my one little issue.
You mentioned that this is a fundamental problem with Congress as it is now. I mean, we've all been at this long enough to remember when things used to work normally. When I think it was 13 appropriation bills, they would go through a process and whatnot. It's been decades since it's been like that. I'm laughing because the way we talk about this, it almost feels like there's one train leaving the station, everybody has to get on board. And I imagine that train is like that horror movie, Snowpiercer, the one where like they're all murdering each other. It's like the last train on Earth. That's what
anyone else? I've never seen.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's crazy. It's like it is properly apocalyptic for this moment in American politics. What's happening, and I think we're getting a preview of what we're going to be seeing, starting in the first 100 days. I mean, because look, you have to get funded, but how long does that funding last? All right. So this is basic operations. What happens with the sunset on the tax cuts? All right. This is going to be perhaps the first major battle. I mean, if you look at Trump's agenda going into the White House and a lot of what DOGE has talked about, the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, a lot of that is executive action. But in terms of working with Congress, this is going, tax cuts, that's going to be one of the key issues. The margins are so tight. I remember when Trump floated Jared Moskowitz for Florida. My first thought was, well, that's interesting because that would improve the margin in the House for all this horse trading. And easy to see why he said no to FEMA because it's so tight right now.
So he's a member of Congress that Trump wanted to put it in the administration, but would have really tightened the margin even more.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is a preview, and it's going to be tough. I mean, I'm actually I've been looking at how some of the business groups are planning to lobby on this ahead of the tax cuts. I'm working on a piece about that right now, and it was fascinating to me because traditionally, you hire lobbyists to go to Congress, meet with the lawmakers, tell them vote this way, vote that way. This is the reason why you should care about this. Iowa, we've got this corn thing going on. This is how we'd like you to vote. You have Elon Musk with Twitter X, whatever, as a massive instant lobbying platform. It's direct, and things have changed so much. And I think that it's almost like the end of the 2024 election, like the immediate aftermath of that, where we're starting to realize what's always been in place, what has been in place for years now.
So, Steve, the thing that's interesting is Elon Musk tweeted out, this Congress should pass no bills until January 20th, i.e., that would result in a government shutdown. Okay, I'm not afraid of a government shutdown. But the reality is that if the government is shut down, how does Donald Trump get inaugurated? I mean, I'm being serious. He can still hold his hand up, but there's no, you wouldn't have an actual real inauguration then because the government workers wouldn't be there. And I think it's like, I'm all for this. Like, I think we've got $36 trillion in debt. You mentioned the bond market's going nuts. But at some point I also go, okay, that's just kicking the can down the road. That's not dealing with the real problem.
Sure. No, listen, I think there's two tracks here. One is, this is the beauty of earning the control of the majority in the House, at least, right? Of having the speakership, is he can control the legislation. So if he were disciplined and focused, he would say, hey, the farm bill is important. Disaster relief is important. Those are both going to be standalone bills, and then a continuing resolution to continue spending at the status quo, which none of us like, but the political reality is we don't have the White House yet. So a clean CR. If you had those three legislative vehicles all moving forward, and at the same time, concurrently, you had really effective messaging that, hey, if any of these three go down, it's because of the Democrats, because the Republicans can be united.
Exactly. Put them where's their spine?
And Sean, this is key because, we're talking a lot about Musk, and he's super important, of course, but it's really broader than just Musk. It's alternative media. If there's one takeaway that should really invigorate us, I hope, from this election win, this momentous Trump win, It's that we thankfully do not have to rely on the legacy, biased, corrupt corporate media any longer. Trump absolutely proved the power of new media, alternative media, including, of course, X, but a lot of platforms, shows like yours, over the top shows that are so incredibly important. If we right now, and I mean this minute, like we're doing on this show, if we message correctly that, hey, the legislation is going to be clean, it's going to be standalone and focused, and if it goes down, it's because of the Democrats and they own responsibility for it, then I believe we have the right strategy and the right leverage, A, to probably pass all of them, but B, if we don't, to make sure that the public is well aware of who is responsible if, for example, let's say the inauguration isn't pulled off in the normal fashion that is due to the dignity of the event.
Preach, brother Cortez. Cortez for speaker. I mean, Patrice, I just, look, I don't, this to me, what Steve said, I'm 100% on board. And with all due respect to Steve, this isn't rocket science. Why are we not just putting this on the table and saying, okay, Democrats, here's a clean CR, vote against it. It's on you. Here's the bridge funding for the bridge that went down in Maryland, right? Vote against it. Here's a farm bill extension. Vote against it. Why do we have to jam it all in a 1,500-page bill? Because there's no political will. Why don't these stand on their own? If it fails, it fails. But I feel like, by the way, total side note, Patrice, did you know that in the bill, they pegged disaster relief at $100 billion? That's right. You wouldn't know. How amazing is that? All this devastation and tragic outcomes from the storm, and it added up exactly to $100 billion. I can't believe it. I mean, they didn't even try to fake it. It wasn't like $101.7 billion. Like literally, that looks like someone said, I think it's about $100 billion. Like, it's insulting to us how this is happening.
It is. But the challenge for Republicans now is that Hakeem Jeffries already came out, yesterday, and threw down the gauntlet and said, oh, no, it's not our fault. It's Republicans' fault. And no one came out. He said this government shutdown hangs 100% on Republicans, which is 100% a lie. We know that.
No. Right now it does. Right now it does, because they don't have their act together.
Well, but yeah, so I mean, yeah, it wouldn't have been. Democrats have not held up their end of the bargain, and that is 100% true. But now this point, it's going to be hard to be able to reclaim that messaging for Republicans to say, oh, no, let's put the clean CR forward. If it fails, it's because of them. They've already set the narrative, and it's a narrative that often works, which is that whenever there's a government shutdown, it's because of Republicans, and Republicans don't care about poor people. So he already got out very early ahead of this. It's going to be hard to kind of bring it back in and change the narrative. And that's the challenge that we're dealing with. That said, do we need a clean CR? Yes, we do. Can we deal with disaster relief, the ag money, which is a ton, and all of the PBM healthcare 1,300 pages worth of reforms? I don't even know what those look like. We could deal with that separately. But this is a preview, I think, of the tax fights. Right now, conservatives have not even coalesced around whether there's going to be one budget reconciliation bill or two. And in that first one, whether it's going to be, the priority will be tax cuts, extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, or whether it's going to be immigration and permitting reform to bring down energy prices. So if we can't figure out how to stick together now, conservatives, how are you going to figure out how to deal with the bigger whopper, which is pretty huge, the TCJA extensions, which no one is even talking about if it needs to be paid for or how it's going to be paid for.
Tom LoBianco, if you're reporting on this and Speaker Johnson puts on the floor what we talked about, a clean CR, it's from now until March, straight up, and all the issues are going to be separate legislative vehicles. I think that the reporting is Republicans put up bill to extend government funding. I actually think if that were to happen, what Steve was articulating, then the Democrats have to decide to vote against it, not for actual more for political reasons than practical reasons. Because how do you vote against a bill that just says, fine, we're going to keep the government funded at X level and we'll deal with these other things in individual legislative fashion?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because, we've talked about this before. I'm having, flashbacks to how Mike Johnson got here in the first place, which was, the wheeling dealing where, about a year and a half ago or a few months ago, last October, he looked like he knew how to herd cats. It's problematic because how do you bring people in? All right. And again, a preview of some of this tax battle, right? We're going to be having a number of moderate Republicans. Yes, they still exist throughout the Northeast, not many. But the SALT debate, state and local taxation, that's going to be a big one. It's really problematic for Johnson in particular. And I thought it was very fascinating how, if you look at when Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to attack him, tried to, take him out a few months ago, and he and Trump were able to work together and say, okay, we're not doing that. But now that's post-election, those same dynamics are still there. The margins are still so tight. I don't know how he does it. I mean, it would be a lot easier to message, absolutely, as a political operation, completely. But the margins are so tight. I don't know what the current one is. I mean, the last one I saw was like 217, 215, something like that. But it's a few members that you don't have a lot to work with. Really, it's very tough, no matter who becomes it. If Steve's speaker, and Steve might be better at it, I mean.
Well, Tom, let me give you an idea, and everybody, please, let me give you an idea for what, because listen, I agree. Of course he's in a tough spot. By the way, he chose to be in a tough spot. Yeah, governing the United States is hard, okay? Nobody should shed any tears. These are big boys and girls, right? They have an important job to do that they chose and volunteered to do. But let me give you an actual tangible idea of something that the speaker could do to regain the narrative and to show real leadership that would not only solidify his place as speaker, but I think matter a lot for momentum into the spring. What he should say is not just that, hey, we're going to have clean bills, as we've been discussing here, at least 3 clean bills: clean CR, farm bill, disaster relief. We're going to present them for up or down votes and message appropriately on it. But he should also say this, and we are not going to adjourn until those votes are done. If that takes us into Christmas, so be it. Now, will that happen? No, I'm not going to hold my breath. Why? Because most of those people on the Hill are incredibly selfish, whether it's staffers or members. But if he were to say, hey, we're not taking a leave, okay? Because guess what? There's a lot of people who work on behalf of the United States, people who wear uniforms like Sean Spicer did, who don't get Christmas off. How about these leaders say, this is important enough that if we had to stay here through Christmas, Santa Claus is going to have to come to Capitol Hill, because we are going to make sure that these votes happen in the strategic, correct way, not a 1,500-page behemoth, not a boondoggle for lobbyists, but rather in a way that represents the American people. If Speaker Johnson did that, he would really regain momentum, reclaim the narrative, and I think solidify his place as speaker into the next session, and also gain a lot of credibility for the legislative fights to come that you've mentioned, Tom.
All right. Before I get to the debt part of this, the debt ceiling that Donald Trump gets in, I want to just tell you guys an interesting fact that I stumbled across. 1 in 2 Americans have high blood pressure, and the number 1 risk factor when it comes to mortality is high blood pressure. I didn't realize this. The thing that's so interesting is, normally when you go to a doctor, their immediate reaction, like everything else, is, well, take a pill. But I have an alternative for that is proven to work. 120 Life. It's a blend of great tasting superfruit juices. I've been taking this now for going on 3 weeks. This stuff, like, I'd chug it all day long. It's that good. And maybe I would have no blood pressure. I don't know. It's formulated with ingredients to show that they can naturally help control high blood pressure. And it's endorsed by thousands of health professionals. You can try it yourself, actually risk-free, with their 2-week starter pack. Go to 120life.com, the number 120life.com, and use code word SPICER to save 15%, and you get free shipping. It's my Christmas present to you, folks. 120life.com. Use code word SPICER. I mean, seriously, they are so confident. Check this out. That they can noticeably lower your blood pressure in 2 weeks. They will literally give you your money back. So you're getting 15% off, free shipping, and a money-back guarantee. So you've literally got nothing to lose. Go to 120life.com, 120life.com, and use code word SPICER, 15% off and free shipping. All right, Patrice, Donald Trump threw a curveball in, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, through these whole negotiations, saying, I also want you guys to raise the debt ceiling because, gosh, we're spending so much money. We're coming up on the legal authorized amount to borrow money, and he doesn't want to have to deal with it as president. So he's like, get it over with or get rid of it altogether. I get it. I get politically why he doesn't want to do this, and I get it. But I also feel like if you have no guardrails anymore, then you're just going to keep spending.
Well, yeah. Listen, President Trump, I appreciate what he's done, what he wants to do, but he also doesn't want to touch the guardrail of entitlements, right? And so this is not surprising that he doesn't mind raising the debt ceiling and putting on any sort of guardrails, because frankly, I don't think he's interested in touching Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, the entitlements, which is really one of the big
No, they are the drivers. That's it. I mean, you can't address real
debt. They really are. So, that's part of the populist part of him, and what he speaks to, which is big government is actually okay if it's big for me and big for the issues that I really care about. Now, that goes in some tension with DOGE. DOGE is trying to cut, $2 trillion from the budget, but they're obviously not touching entitlements either. They're not touching mandatory spending. So, he did it. I'm not surprised. He doesn't want to deal with it down the line, but hopefully somebody, JD Vance, will want to talk about fiscal sanity and fiscal responsibility if there's a JD Vance, if he takes up the mantle and is elected after President Trump leaves office in 4 years.
Tom, you cover the Hill, right? You talk to a lot of these members. We are spending over $1 trillion on interest on the debt, on interest. That's more than we spend on our entire national defense. The DOD budget is less than that. We spend more on the interest payments. I know it's not popular, but I feel like at some point, if we don't get serious with spending, we're going to be screwed.
Yeah. It's, just hearing these numbers, I feel like I need to start taking some of this 120 life. I mean, that, what's crazy about this is it's like we go through, these elections, right? And, we are in the trenches. This is such a regular thing for us. But after every election, we come back to reality, which is, okay, guys, guess what? We got to deal with this. All right. Okay, why were politicians just elected? All right, you got to go in and deal with this. As Patrice mentioned here, this so much is already locked in by statute. This is legally required, and this gets to the Department of Government Efficiency. How can you cut $2 trillion? What are your options? This also gets back to in the spirit of the season, legislative Christmas trees like the CR, which turned into an omnibus. Larded up with everything that every constituency would love to see. You start dealing with things like that, and it becomes very hard to eliminate spending. It becomes very hard to cut spending. To reach numbers like the trillions, you have to look past the post office, and you have to start looking at defense. That's the level of spending that people are talking about. It's not the rinky-dink stuff. It's like when you start getting into moving from the B's to the T's. All right, what's the old joke? The Ways and Means guys would tell you, $1 million here, $1 million there. Pretty soon you got $1 billion. Well, $1 billion here and $1 billion there. Pretty soon you got $1 trillion. All right. These are incredibly huge numbers.
Steve, the problem is I don't get a sense. I tell this story often. And Newt Gingrich in 1994, when he was campaigning for speaker, would run around with an ice bucket and say, I don't know, it was like $200,000 that Congress was spending, putting ice outside of every member of Congress's office. And this is in the 1990s when they all have refrigerator and freezers, because some kids knew some kid's father whose second cousin was a member of Congress, and he got the patronage job. And Newt said, we've got to cut this kind of wasteful spending out. They're not even trying anymore. This is what embarrasses me as Republicans. There's PBS, NPR, the National Endowment for the Humanities, all fine things, I'm sure, to some degree, but why is the government in that business? And the list goes on and on. We're not even trying.
Right. No, exactly. And by the way, why does the Department of Education exist at the federal level? And now that we have full control of government, it better be gone, right? Because we promised the people that. Let's see if it happens or not. I'm skeptical, to be honest. And I have to say, I think the idea of raising the debt ceiling right now is incredibly dangerous, particularly what's going on in the real world, both at the Main Street level and at the Wall Street level. And what I mean by that, at the Main Street level, right now, according to Redfin, the big realty company, according to Redfin, people who make $50,000 or less right now in this country, 3/4 of them are unable to pay their rent. So think about that. Middle class and modest means people literally cannot pay their rent, a super majority of them right now. That is directly because of the reckless borrowing and spending in Washington, D.C. And then to take it to the Wall Street level, I mentioned the bond market before, but it's not just the bond market. Look at the gold market, for example. Look at Bitcoin. Both of those markets, gold and Bitcoin, at all-time highs against the dollar. Why? Because investors believe right now that dollars will be increasingly worthless because they're going to be the government is going to inflate its way to paying the debt, because that's the only option right now for the government. So it's a dangerous time. These are very precarious times. Donald Trump is inheriting an absolute mess, okay? It's the opposite of what he handed off to Joe Biden. He handed off an economy that was recovering big time from the spring of 2020 lockdowns with low inflation. He is now inheriting an economy that in most ways is decelerating with massive inflationary problems and a $36 trillion debt. So it's a really tough job, right? To this kind of a baton pass on to Donald Trump. I think he's capable of it. I think people like Scott Bessent, his incoming Treasury Secretary, Russ Voder, OMB, all of them are capable of handling this, momentous task. But it's going to require really serious, really hard choices. And government in Washington, D.C. is not good at making serious, hard choices.
So am I reading you right? You don't think the debt ceiling should be raised, correct?
Correct. I do
Yeah,
not.
I'm with you.
Absolutely not.
I think,
And I think the bond market will freak out if it is. I really do.
okay, well, I agree with you. I think that taking the guardrails off and allowing spending, it gives Washington one more excuse not to deal anything. Patrice, you name checked DOGE, this Department of Government Efficiency that's being led by Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. Do you have any hope that they will actually be successful?
I do. I understand that they don't have any sort of fiscal power. Everything that they're going to achieve is going to be delivered to President Trump in recommendations that he can then turn into executive orders. You have now a House panel headed by Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's, I guess, probably supposed to be working with them to figure out, okay, what are the legislative opportunities that are there? So if nothing else, I'm looking forward to all the recommendations they come forward with, going on the record, and then President Trump trying to at least implement those through executive order. Maybe now then that puts some accountability on the shoulders of Congress to say, okay, how can we make these permanent? Because obviously we've seen in lots of different regulatory areas, one administration has an executive order, the next one comes in and flips it over and erases it. And President Trump had a great, if you remember in Trump 1.0, for every new regulation, 2 had to be cut. That was fantastic. It forced Congress, these agencies to do sunsetting on a lot of arcane, costly, unnecessary, burdensome regulations for a lot of businesses and corporations. So I think DOGE will probably start from that starting point and start to identify where these areas are. And because you're talking about Elon Musk and Vivek, who is very adept at getting messages out in the public, they're not just going to wait for a big, long report that goes to the president that you hope gets picked up by ABC or Fox or PBS and NewsHour. They're going to be filtering it out through video content, through podcasting, getting these things out there so regular Americans can provide some accountability too, to say, okay, I want to see how can we turn this executive order into something that's made permanent.
Tom, based on your time on Capitol Hill, and at least the initial reception, and actually, frankly, the fact that some Democrats, have reached across the aisle and said, all right, I'll help with you guys on this. Do you think that there's any chance that DOGE actually succeeds in cutting government waste?
Yeah, I think so. I've had this debate with a number of sources over the last month or so. And, I look at it as number one, the second Trump administration, no matter who it is, officially nominated, officially in the White House or in these advisory roles like the DOGE, has a better understanding of the levers of power inside the executive, all the agencies where all the spending is happening. They have a much better sense of it. And the other part too is that, I was talking with a source about this probably a couple weeks ago, about this timeline of bringing people in from Musk's operation, some of the folks who have worked with Vivek Ramaswamy over the years, these landing teams, so to say. They're not taking any pay. It's not a formal position, but going in and over the next 6, 7, 8 months or so, having an understanding, really looking at the books to see, all right, this is what we can do. All all right, this is what we can do with executive action. This is what will require, legislative action. Um, I think that increased expertise gives it a better chance at succeeding. But of course, as again, the counterpoint to that would be, what we have seen this week, which is, when the fun house is in session, all right, and when everybody's in the halls in Congress, it is a lot easier to mess around with that dynamic. All right, it's not one branch of government. There's three. All right, and you have that interplay, so that creates problems. Certainly, when people start debating these things, like in the old what was it, the I don't know if he has it anymore. The cigar room, Tom Cole used to have that right off outside the chamber. You always know when a real bill is happening when you smell the cigar smoke.
Steve Cortez, you talked about how to message this properly when it came to the CR. I think the same thing is right. Patrice mentioned this. Like, start with the simple, the outrageous. Get people fired up about the waste. And I get the inefficiencies, and that's where a lot more money is. But the reason that Newt used the ice bucket is because it was symbolic of the waste. And so I think that Elon and Vivek are both smart guys. They're both business guys that understand the reality of waste, because it was their money that they're putting into a company. So they're like, if there's waste, I don't get profit. I think that the strategy is just as important as that, like more important than even some of the tactics and the looking at, because if they get the American people to say, I'm outraged by that, that's a waste of my money, because Newt harnessed that. And he got people to say, I'm pissed that I'm working 2 jobs, I'm working 60 hours a week, and you guys are wasting my money.
Yeah. Sean, I think you're 100% correct. Look, I hope that the actual, tactical reforms of DOGE are significant. But what I believe is going to be more significant, I think you're exactly correct, is the messaging and narrative change. And what I mean by that is changing the way of thinking of the American people in a way that is lasting. Of saying that, for example, a government that can't even regulate itself certainly should not be regulating my life, my business, my company, right? And if we get that kind of regulatory reform, because the regulatory burden of the Leviathan of Washington, D.C., it is stifling for this country. And it's one of the reasons that we don't have the kind of productivity that we have. And this is so important because, look, I've been given a pretty dour assessment of where things are regarding the debt, and I am extremely worried. But let me also point the way out. What is the escape hatch, as it were? If we're not willing to have entitlement reform, and that seems politically impossible, well, then we have to get way, way more productive as a country, not just government. As a country, we need to get massively more efficient and productive. And if we do that, then it is possible for us to grow our way out of this massive
I hate
debt.
that, though. I hate that because it just allows the spending to continue. I get your point. And that's
well, I'm saying it's got to be both. It's got to be both.
Yes.
Right at the same time. No, I am not pro spending. So we have to cut spending. But again, there's only so much juice from cutting discretionary spending.
Right.
If we won't touch defense and we won't touch entitlements, and it doesn't appear that Trump's willing to touch either one, then there's just not that much to squeeze out of discretionary. So let's do it, absolutely, but let's relieve the regulatory burden, and that's where I think the messaging and the narrative change of DOGE can be really, really significant and lasting for this country and get us productive again. And if we do that at the same time, concurrently, then we can at least get the debt under control.
Patrice, you had something to say.
Yeah. No, well, no, I 100% agree. The messaging is huge on this. I was in some meetings with some Hill staffers who are part of the 2017 tax cuts discussion. And I said to them, they were fantastic. And cutting corporate taxes are great. And they actually feed right into workers' paychecks through bonuses, bigger paychecks, new benefits. But that was not messaged. And unfortunately, the left took the TCJA and turned it into, just tax cuts for the wealthy. And that is a misperception that persists today. How do we ensure that that the same thing doesn't happen here with what DOGE is able to accomplish and what President Trump is able to accomplish? And I think it is very much about the messaging, very much about ensuring that you've got people like podcasts, like what we're doing right now, who are not just waiting for hopefully the White House press corps to actually report on something that's happening, good news, but actually saying, no, this is exactly what's happening. When you say two regulations out for every new one in, this is actually what it means for a small business. That means a small business is saving 10, 20 hours of paperwork and time and money for an accountant that they have to hire so they can invest in their business. When you're talking about the tax cuts, that means that you may get a bonus. That means that you don't get a new tax increase January 1 of 2026. That is why this is so important. Oh, and even corporate tax cuts are good for you too as a regular person. So the messaging is going to be huge. It's a huge piece of it. And that's why if Elon Musk and Vivek, but especially if Elon Musk was not part of DOGE, I don't think that you would be able to get the kind of bang for your buck out of this quasi-government oversight type agency. You just wouldn't, because even though Vivek is doing his videos, his reach is nearly not as strong as Elon Musk's reach.
Yeah, I love the way that Elon always piles on to Vivek's tweets. It's like, hey, brother, I got you. I'll amplify this. One quick point on the mandatory entitlement spending, which is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, VA. There are reforms that make sense that could yield huge savings without touching the programs. They've got to be willing to at least do smart, efficient changes that make sense. I mean, they did that with Veterans Choice, by the way, in the VA, and everybody was happy with it. So there's ways to do that. All right, I want to go around the horn, Tom LoBianco, and start with you before we get into winners and losers. I have a simple question. I want a simple answer. On January 20th, when Donald Trump is sworn into office, is Mike Johnson the Speaker of the House? Now, I will add some context. Thomas Massey from Kentucky is already saying that he is a absolute 100% no. And this is what Andy Harris from Maryland said. There's an increasing number of people after what happened this week who said they're on the fence whether to back Johnson for re-election Speaker. So, Tom LoBianco, yes or no, on January 20th, when Donald Trump takes the oath of office, is Mike Johnson the Speaker of the House?
Yes.
Steve Cortez, is Mike Johnson Speaker of the House?
No, nada.
Patrice Onwuku, is Mike Johnson the Speaker of the House?
Yes.
I think we'll know more in 24 hours. I'm with Steve more than you guys, meaning if he can't broker this deal and it gets messy, he's done. By the way, you need a Speaker of the House to certify the results for president. I mean, we're going down some massive rabbit holes. All right, as we do on Thursdays, we always get to winners and losers. I have been really impressed the last couple of weeks, so I dug deep. I have some that I hope no one steals this time. Tom, I'm going to start with you. Who won the week? Who lost the week?
Oh, man, I'm so glad I'm first. Elon Musk.
See, I knew someone was going to say that.
Yep.
All right,
I'm probably going for the low-hanging fruit here, definitely.
Who lost the week, in your opinion?
Mike Johnson.
Okay, see, I still think the verdict's out. He could have really lost it. He could recover. But I think right now, Thursday, yeah. All right, Steve Cortez, who won, who lost?
Lost the week, AOC seems to be losing her generational battle on the Democrat side, which frankly shocks me because I think, of course, I agree with her on nothing, but I think she's an incredibly effective leader for their side. They should give her that seat, but it's obviously not up to me. So I'll say she is the loser. For the winner, you already mentioned Thomas Massey. If I can,
by the way, can I just, Steve, real quick, you realize all these other old bulls got out of the way when the younger person said, I want to be ranking member of the committee. Jerry Conley from Virginia said, bring it, AOC. Of the one person that I thought might topple somebody, AOC had the juice. I mean, of all these other people, I was like, what are you doing? Why are you folding like a cheap suit? AOC, I think that the dirty story in that is that Nancy Pelosi was like, I'm not letting that woman rise.
That could be.
All right. Who do you have as your winner?
Yeah, as winner, co-winner to two Kentuckians, to Rand Paul and to Thomas Massey. I think both of them have shown just incredible principle. You mentioned what Massey already said about the speaker. Similarly, Rand Paul saying he's backing Kennedy. He's backing Tulsi Gabbard. So I think Kentuckians, I'm proud of my Tennessee representatives, senators, and House members. The folks in Kentucky should be really proud of their delegation right now. I think they both won.
Yeah, and by the way, Rand has been a champ on spending too. Like he's been going after the speaker like a spider monkey. Patrice, who's your winner and loser?
Winners are President Trump's nominees. So far, they've weathered some pretty rocky weeks, and none of them are really making headlines this week, which is probably a good thing. And my loser, Fonnie Willis, breaking news. She's
Oh, that's right. Oh,
in Georgia.
well
Which is,
done.
I think probably what the last big case for President Trump. Well, maybe one of the bigger ones. We knew it was going to fall apart, but boy, the egg on her face. Another Black woman, Democrat, has proven that she does not run the show.
Yeah, rule of thumb. Don't go after the president of the United States while you're appointing your boyfriend that you're having an affair with. Anyway, that's just a lesson learned. All right, for the first time in weeks, I actually have a winner and a loser that nobody picked.
What's up?
The winner is Herschel Walker, named ambassador to the Bahamas. I mean, if you're going to be ambassador to the Bahamas. Like, that to me, like, that's the gig, right? I mean, I can't even imagine how tough, like, ambassador, we've got a big crisis. The tide is not going out as quick as we thought. I mean, like, I'm
Can
kidding.
you imagine those dinners? Oh, all that fish, yummy.
I'm kidding, Bahamas, but I'm just saying, like, that's the, and my loser, hashtags. Elon Musk put out this tweet the other day that said hashtags are done. No more. They don't affect the algorithm. They're out. So no more hashtags. They're the losers of the week. Anyway, thank you guys for being us. What a great Thursday panel we had. I appreciate all you guys joining us. Total insight that you're not going to see anywhere else on this debt ceiling and why it matters. Tomorrow, by the way, Victor Davis Hanson. And on Monday, you want to know whether we're prepared to fight? Eric Prince will be here, the founder of Blackwater, Navy SEAL. He's going to give us insight about our readiness as a military and as a country. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss this because Eric Prince does not hold back. Tomorrow, Victor Davis Hanson. Monday, Eric Prince. Remember, if you're looking for insight in the inauguration, I cannot get you tickets. I promise you I can't. But I have information in SeanSpicer.com on how to get tickets. So if you're interested in going to a parade, a ball, whatever, I can at least tell you where you can get that stuff. It's in SeanSpicer.com. Sign up. It's free, but it's a Christmas time. So if you want to either give yourself the gift of becoming a VIP or gift it to someone else, nothing says I love you like a subscription to SeanSpicer.com. You will be loved by family members. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow with Victor Davis Hanson.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.